Big things are happening in One Piece, and as always, we're going to talk about them because this is where we do that. But before we start, did you notice the secret power that our mysterious cloaked lady used on that poor giant? Or were you too focused on Ripley and thinking about the logistics of how human can make a giant pregnant? So I want to start by saying that this is an extremely strange week to be a One Piece fan, because for the first time in, I think, ever, the official translation came out before the scans did. Because due to what is almost certainly an error, or more appropriately, en erreur, the official French translation for chapter 1135 went live on Manga Plus, and at the time of recording this video, it is still live, because I imagine that everyone who could and should be fixing this is on some sort of post-Christmas, pre-New Year holiday. And this is pretty bad. I mean, One Piece does get leaked every week, but it usually doesn't get leaked by the official source. And because it's official, I don't even know if you can call it a leak. It's just an early official release, so if you can read French, then mate, go for it. Or if you just want to look at the pretty pictures and pretend it to be cultured, then that's fine as well. Because I will say that the official French pages are much higher quality than the official English, which is a gripe that I've had for quite some time now. In fact, almost every other translation has better image quality than the English does, and I really wish that Viz would fix this, because sometimes reading the official English translation genuinely hurts my eyes because it's so blurry. That aside, we've got an amazing chapter to cover en français apparemment, donc allons-y. So very quickly on the cover story, I love what's happening here because it shows us the evolution of Tama on her quest to become a bewitching kunoichi. Tama has of course been training with Shinobu, and she's picked up enough skills to pay the bills that are hitting Hold'em in his face. Which is a great contrast because Hold'em is the guy who Tama was completely powerless against way back in Act 1 of Wano. And it's really as simple as that. We've now come full circle with Tama, and I didn't expect her to be the most interesting part of the Yamato cover story, but here we are. Moving on with Elbaf though, we spend some more time in the Owl Library, which I really appreciate because it gives us another moment of calm with Robin and Saul. It's also always nice to see Robin and Chopper bonding because they do have shared interest in academia. Different sectors, but they're library buddies, and I find that very cute. And I'm very much savoring scenes like this because I know that very shortly we're going to be kicking into gear with all the main conflict and the dramas and actions of Elbaf, and the fun laid-back moments like this are going to evaporate for the next year and a bit at least. You don't truly realize how much you miss this stuff until you are thrust into non-stop action. But the owl, as predicted, is the one responsible for the book's growing and shrinking, and it is indeed a devil fruit, or at least it is highly suspected to be a devil fruit, because this is where having Vegapunk is paying off in a way that I did not predict, as Lilith is essentially a walking devil fruit encyclopedia, the Straw Hat's own personal Pokedex for devil fruits. Whenever they encounter a new power, they just need to whip out their Lilith, and she should be able to identify it so long as it was logged in the encyclopedia. And when they aren't logged, it's usually pretty obvious what the power is anyway, like Kaku's giraffe fruit. But Lilith deduces that this very old owl is probably using the Iku Ikunomi. And I'm using the Japanese name because I do think that we need the English to clear up the translation. At the moment, it's being referred to as the rear fruit. Rear as in caring for your young until they're capable of caring for themselves. But also rear just sounds like arse fruit. And I don't know if we want that. I mean, some people want that. Although I should say that Iku is getting some silent chuckles within the Japanese speaking readership, because Iku most commonly means to go, it's a verb. However, in Japanese, it's also used colloquially to mean to come. And it's used that way in exactly the way you're thinking, so what we have here is the come fruit. And we'll get back to that in a bit. That's surprisingly appropriate, because this owl's powers are the only way that I can realistically currently explain the existence of a certain child. But speaking of children, Luffy's main act in this chapter is to terrorize the children of Elbaf, which is a lot funnier than it should be. And there's a nice moment of Nami beating up both Luffy and Usopp, the latter of which got caught up in some collateral damage. And I always love seeing Nami interact with children because it brings out a lot of her personality that we don't usually get to see very often when she's just standing off in the background. Nami has two hard counters in this world. One is strong marine women because they remind her of Belmare, and the other is kids because she doesn't want any of them to go through even a modicum of the hardship that she had to suffer through as a child. Although I personally have no sympathy for these children, no sympathy at all, because all of this was but a clever ruse. Oda has decided to reuse the Momonosuke gag of acting scared in order to attain a face full of boob, which makes Sanji jealous, and I'm not sure why, because he got a ride in Gurd's chest as well, so this is just Oda being Oda. And I guess it's also finally time to talk about the artistic objectives of Elbaf. As many of you know, because I've said this many times, Oda publicly stated that he gave himself a challenge on Egghead Island to learn how to draw, quote, erotic butts. And I think on Elbaf, he's now taking every opportunity to explore a concept that I believe is known as macrophilia, a fantasy involving giants or other assorted big things. And if you're into big things, then mate, do I have the YouTube channel for you. It's called The Calm Belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos, perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos. And these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, well, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long-form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. So as part of this giant exploration, we have a pretty huge revelation in this chapter, being the father of Colin, who is a human who has somehow achieved a physical coupling with Colin's mother, Ripley, which does sound like quite the logistical achievement. And to now step back into the owl library, I'm just saying that this owl has the power to make things at giant size, so there is a logical explanation for this out there. Owls are, of course, not your typical intimate aid, but on Elbaf, whatever works. And notice how Oda chose to have Sanji ask the question about Colin's dad being human, because you can practically see the gears spinning in his twirly head about his own potential future with a giant. However, now that this information is out there, the internet has begun an intense investigation into who could possibly be Colin's father, and right now there's a lot of accusations involving the red hair pirates, and even finger pointing at Mr. Shanks himself, who has been an absolute menace of fostering the next generation with Luffy and Uta. However, the list of daddy candidates is surprisingly short, because before leaving the bar, the owner, Mato, gave Colin some food for his mother, Ripley, and also, quote, Daddy's favorite too, implying that Colin's father is currently on Elbaf. And at the moment, there's really only one other human of relevance on Elbaf, which is the silhouetted figure who we saw talking to Crocus long time ago. The one who looks like Golden Lion Shiki, but is also highly suspected to maybe be Scopa-Gaban. Really, his exact identity doesn't hugely matter for the sake of this discussion, but it is extremely likely that this man is Colin's father. And in this chapter, Colin does confirm that his father used to be a pirate, and a pretty big shot pirate as well. One who wasn't afraid of the giants of Elbaf at all. And in fact, evidently he was the exact opposite of afraid. And Ripley does say that her husband, but not husband, is much younger than she is, but that really doesn't help us narrow down the age range, because even the oldest of humans are still probably much younger than Ripley, as she does appear to wear a top that has the Jolly Roger of the giant warrior pirates on it, which has me thinking that she might be closer to the age of Dory and Broggy, both of whom are currently 160, although it's very difficult to tell with giants. Ripley could also be part of Harridan's generation, which I believe would be the last group of actually trained warriors, and Harridan's only 81, so Ripley could be around there as well, which I do point out because if the silhouetted figure is Scopa-Gaban, then he would be in his late 70s now, which isn't all that much younger than Ripley would be at all. So this very patient Wano-hatted man could be a much younger character than any of us have been thinking. I should say that there are other humans on Elbaf. Loki's cloaked figures in the underworld, for example, who are probably former pirates, but I highly doubt that any of them have the sheer aura required to even register on the Ripley scale. It is surprising that Colin is only a half giant though, because he does look big enough to be a full giant, at least a full giant child. And the only other time that I can recall encountering a confirmed half giant was Big Pan during Long Ring Longland, who was actually a Wotan, a half giant, half fishman. But even then, he was definitely smaller than the average giant due to that mix. So when Colin grows up, he's probably going to be around Big Mom or Kaido size, and he's probably going to be an absolute monster in terms of strength. And I think that this plays nicely into the cover story where we see Tama starting to grow in power, because remember, all of the children that we see in One Piece aren't just there for the sake of having something to fight for and protect. All of these kids are the next generation. They are the rookies who are going to grow up and see characters like Luffy, Law, and Kid as their version of Roger, Whitebeard, and Garp. And Colin is genuinely interesting because his setup is the reverse of most stories like this, where you have the more gentle, cerebral child growing up in a tribe of warriors. Instead, what we have is Colin, a warrior growing up in a gentle tribe, and he is an outcast because of it. The next generation of giants all see him as some sort of uncouth savage, and in fact, come to think of it, they probably equate his behavior to what they know of Loki, who, whether he did these things or not, is currently being labeled as an evil, violent savage. So my prediction with Colin is that at some point he's going to save the day. Something bad's gonna happen with these kids, and all the other kids are gonna be too scared to do anything. But Colin is going to act in the traditional way of an Elbaf warrior and save the day, or at least he's gonna try to. And something I'd love to see more of is how this cultural development is affecting Usopp. This is the land of his dreams, and it's turned out to be not really what he expected. Although at the moment he's taking this in quite well and adapting to this surprisingly friendly environment, but at some point he's got to realize that there's a bit of a disconnect here with his dream. Although I think this actually opens up a pretty brilliant opportunity for Usopp, because Usopp, of all people, actually embodies more of the traditional values of Elbaf than the current generation. So when things do get bad, it may very well be up to Usopp to protect the giants, or at least the giant children, because even though he is the least physically equipped, he may end up being the most mentally equipped. That's my hope anyway. If we leave Elbaf and Usopp doesn't get a key moment like that, then look, I'm just going to give up on Straw Hat development going forward. But for now, I have hope. Now, as fun as all of this is, we've got some seriously not fun stuff happening around the Western Village, as we have 2 more pages of the Cloaked intruders from the last chapter, and to continue the sense of mystery, Oda elects not to actually show us the Shanks lookalike at all in this chapter. At least nothing to do with his face, because I think that Oda is going to be very reserved with him until the time actually comes to reveal who he is, because this dude, he's pretty tricky to handle. There's only so many different angles that you can draw him in without giving away that it's not Shanks. Or, alternatively, without giving away that it is Shanks, whichever side of that you land on. However, there is a little piece of intrigue about him here, because even in miniature silhouette, we can make out a sword that resembles not only Shanks' griffin, but also Figurland Garling's unnamed blade. So whatever this brand of sword is, appears to be a traditional Figurland weapon. I've seen some people say that this might be the uniform sword style of the Holy Knights, but apart from Garling and Figurland Frank, we haven't seen any other Holy Knight actually use a sword. Even in Dragon's silhouette mind image of the Holy Knight, Oda only shows one figure with a sword, which is almost certainly Frank, because he doesn't have Garling's very distinct hair. And so at first, this makes perfect sense, that Shanks would carry the same kind of sword as his father and alleged twin. But also, it makes not a lot of sense, because all the way from babyhood, Shanks was raised by the Roger Pirates, which means that at some point during his career, Shanks must have confronted his family and either stolen the sword or was potentially even given Griffin for whatever reason. Perhaps that reason was something family honor. I don't know, that'll do for now. Because the main point of interest in this chapter is the mysterious, assumedly, woman. And what she does right here is a bit difficult to pass. I'm not sure if what happened here was depicted as well as it could have been, or if this is just Oda keeping her power vague on purpose. But it looks like our Cloaked lady has an ability that involves conjuring and or manipulating bandages, because they suddenly appear wrapped around the giant and they seem to constrict him into submission. And what this reminds me of is Black Maria, because in her Vivia card entry, it was revealed that Oda wasn't originally going to make her a Spiderzoan. She was actually going to be a Paramecia user, and her devil fruit was the Obi Obi no Mi, which means sash fruit, and it would have allowed her to create and manipulate hyper-durable sashes from anywhere on her body, which I thought was a very cool idea and kind of wanted to see in action more so than the Spiderzoan, and that might be what we're seeing here. This could be Oda repurposing that devil fruit idea, which has happened in the past, and if so, I think this would be a bit of a landmark moment in One Piece, as it would give us our first non-Emu World Noble devil fruit user, assuming assuming that the 5 elders aren't individual fruit users and that their powers are an extension of Imu's abilities? Because I imagine that eating devil fruits is quite a taboo act in world noble society, because they believe themselves to be their gods and their enemies to be demons and devils. So eating a devil fruit is very much feasting on the evil, cursed, forbidden fruit. And that could be what separates the Holy Knights from the rest of the world nobles. They could be a force who have taken evil upon themselves in order to use it to protect the good. It may be mandatory for Holy Knights to become devil fruit users to consume powers so that they cannot be used against them. And that may also be why they don't use the same sort of diving gear as all the other world nobles do, because they're already fallen beings. They have consumed the sinister fruits and have no need to protect their already very exposed lungs from the evil air of the masses. But either way, these two are looking for Loki, which is curious because the initial thought is that they went to Elbaf to pursue Luffy, or at least that was my thought. So is it possible that Figland, Frank, and friend of Frank are here for a completely unrelated purpose? Because we have another talk from the giant guards about how Loki is a bad criminal man who killed our beloved King Harold, and every time someone repeats this, it makes me more inclined to think that it isn't true, and that what's happened here with Loki has been more of a tragic misunderstanding, an act that Loki is putting on for the good of Elbaf, and that this King Harold was not quite as benevolent of a man as everyone claims. So I'm very keen to see how this all plays out, because if these Holy Knights want to see Loki, then I'm not sure that there is anything on this island capable of stopping them.